fiction has become increasingly realist. Like, we don't have a Flann O'Brien anymore. And that playfulness and ability to incorporate the uncanny, the spectral, the non-realist, it's gone with that kind of loss. And some of that's the loss of religion, because a big, the biggest influence in terms of a spectral, non-temporal reality was Catholicism. You're asking somebody to believe in something beyond themselves. As that gets stripped away from our real life experience, it gets lost in fiction and art as well. And I wonder if we're moving into a period where that comes back again. There's so much fear and angst and war and stuff in the world at the minute. If you look at post First and Second World War, there's such a rise in spiritualism and obsession with ghost stories and things. I can see us moving back into a phase where that stuff is more interesting to people again. I've just been chronically unfashionable my whole writing life, or maybe ahead of the times. I don't know.
Ahead of your time.
I don't like that.
Yes. So we hope people go backward. Is there any last question, or you go? A shy one.
Yes.
Very shy one. Sorry.
Thank you. So yes, thank you for the talk. Thank you for presenting your book. We were talking about this yesterday, and you were just talking now about. You talked a little bit maybe about the connection between violence and magical realism, and maybe a violent past. And maybe we also talked about this yesterday. But what do you think is the connection between magical realism and I guess the land, or conflicts related to the land? Because in Latin America we have lots of history with colonization and just a lot of violent conflicts over land, and we have a lot of folklore too in Latin America. We have a lot of folklore, and also in Ireland.
You're kind of answering the question yourself, and it baffles me, because I feel like, and I'm not a magical realist expert by any means. I've done a little bit of research, but the majority of magical realism comes from places that have a colonial history. It comes from places that have a rich connection with the land, mythology, usually some kind of dominant religion as well. Hello, Ireland. And why there's not more magical realism coming from this space. And also, and I mean this with the greatest respect, I learned to write from reading the Bible. It was my primary text. It was the only text in our family growing up. The Bible's a magical realist text, set in the real world, and then some really weird stuff happens. And I said this to a journalist from Cork about 6 months ago, and he looked at me and he said, "What weird stuff happens in the Bible?" And that just, maybe in secular France you can get away with that, but not in Cork. So it baffles me that we are looking at, even like what Beckett was doing, I think exists. The Argentine writer Samantha Schweblin has this thing that she talks about writing at the end of the possible. That's where really interesting stuff happens, and she illustrates it by saying, if you're writing a story that's set in a hotel and a couple comes back and there's a ghost in their room, you know straight away that you're in the realms of a kind of fable ghost story, uncanny, and part of your brain switches on to understanding the rules of that. If the couple comes back and there's a white horse in their room, it's not impossible, but it's so unsettling. The brain doesn't actually know how to deal with it, and it begins to do much more interesting things in terms of metaphor. And I think Beckett was doing a lot of that writing at the end of the possible. Where is that in Ireland now? We get a lot of realism, and it's reflected in the prizes. The things that still win the Booker Prize, the big Dublin Literary Award, they're often very straight realism, and that feels strange to me. We're a country that should have more imagination, and I'm not against, I would read a lot of great realism, I think there's a place for it too, but I'd like to see a bit more weird stuff. That seems like a really good place to end.
So I think that's it. Thank you, Jen, very much.
Thank you.